Welcome to Craving the Heat, where desire takes the lead and every story leaves you wanting more. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments and keep up with our latest naughty stories. I had hit rock bottom. The rent was overdue by 2 months. My savings were wiped out, and every door seemed to be closing in on me. The city felt colder than ever, not just because of the sharp autumn wind blowing through the streets, but because I was utterly alone. Friends had drifted away, family was far, and my boyfriend of 3 years had left me a few months back. Tired of my endless struggles, the tiny apartment I rented was more than just a roof over my head. It was a symbol of what little I had left. It was on the 3rd floor of a weathered brownstone, with creaky wooden floors and a view of the busy street below. The landlord, Mr. Reynolds, was a middle-aged man with sharp eyes and a reputation for being strict but fair. I'd barely spoken to him except for the usual rent reminders. One evening, as I sat on my worn couch surrounded by unpaid bills, there was a soft knock at the door. It was him, Mr. Reynolds, holding a small envelope. His face was unreadable, but there was something in his voice that caught me off guard. "I know you're struggling," he said quietly, "and I don't want to see you out on the street. I have a proposition if you're willing to listen." I was wary but desperate. What kind of proposition could a landlord possibly offer? I nodded for him to continue. "It's simple," he said. "I need some help around the building, small things, maintenance, occasional errands. I can reduce your rent if you help me out. No strings attached." I felt a flicker of hope. The offer was practical, almost kind. I agreed, grateful beyond words. The next days were a blur of hard work and awkward encounters. Mr. Reynolds wasn't what I expected. He was surprisingly warm beneath his gruff exterior, with a dry sense of humor and a patient demeanor. We talked as I fixed broken locks, painted walls, and ran errands. The chores gave me purpose, a reason to get up every day, but something else began to stir between us, an unspoken tension that neither of us acknowledged. It started with lingering looks, subtle smiles that lasted a little too long. His hand would brush against mine accidentally, or maybe not so accidentally, when handing me tools or passing a cup of coffee. One rainy afternoon, as I was patching a leaky faucet in the basement, Mr. Reynolds appeared behind me. The room was dim, the sound of dripping water echoing between us. He leaned close, his breath warm against my ear, and asked if I needed a break. I nodded. Heart-pounding. We sat on an old wooden crate, the silence between us thick. Then, without warning, he reached out, gently tucking a stray lock of hair behind my ear. His eyes held something vulnerable, something yearning. "I know things haven't been easy for you," he said softly, "but I want you to know you're not alone." The honesty in his voice broke through my defenses. I leaned into him, my lips meeting his in a kiss that was at once tender and urgent. It was as if we were both reaching for something solid in a world that felt unstable. That night, passion consumed us. The boundaries between landlord and tenant vanished, replaced by a desperate need for connection. His hands traced the curves of my body with reverence and hunger, awakening parts of me I thought had been lost forever. But the morning light brought clarity and guilt. I was still alone, still broke, but now I carried a secret that complicated everything. Over the following weeks, our encounters became both an escape and a torment. Mr. Reynolds was kind, but the reality of our situation pressed in. I was still struggling financially, still uncertain of my future. And yet, I craved the warmth and attention he offered, even if it was tangled with betrayal. One evening, as we shared a quiet meal in the kitchen of my apartment, he reached across the table. Taking my hand in his, "I want to help you," he said seriously. "Not just with rent or repairs, but with your life." I looked at him, the man who had become my lifeline in the darkest time, and I realized that love, or whatever this was complicated. It didn't come wrapped in neat packages or easy answers, but before I could respond, my phone buzzed. A message from my ex appeared, reminding me of the life I had left behind. The promises broken, the pain still raw. Torn between past and present, I faced a choice. Cling to the safety of a faded love, or risk everything for a new and uncertain passion. I knew there was no easy way out. But as I looked into Mr. Reynolds' eyes, I understood one thing sometimes. When you're broken and alone, the unexpected offers aren't just about survival. They're about rediscovering hope, desire, and the courage to start over. The days that followed that night felt surreal, as if I were living between two worlds. My relationship with Mr. Reynolds, once purely transactional, had shifted into something far more complicated and dangerously intimate. Each time he came over, I found myself craving not just the warmth of his touch, but the comfort of someone who truly saw me beyond the exhaustion and the bills and the loneliness, but guilt gnawed at me. Every smile he gave was shadowed by the knowledge that I was betraying the memory of my past with my ex, in the promise I'd made to myself to keep my dignity intact. I told myself it was just a moment of weakness, a temporary escape from my broken life. Yet with each stolen glance and secret kiss, that escape started to feel like a trap. Mr. Reynolds seemed to sense my turmoil. One evening, as rain tapped softly against the windows, we sat side by side on my threadbare couch. The dim light made the room feel small. Cocooned, a safe place where I could let my guard down. "I want you to know," he said, voice low and serious, "that this isn't just about the rent or the repairs for me. I care about you more than I probably should." His words hung in the air between us, heavy and fragile. I looked at him, really looked, at the kindness in his eyes, the vulnerability he rarely showed. "I'm scared," I admitted. "Scared?" "Of losing myself again. Scared of what this means." He reached for my hand, his fingers warm and steady. "You're not alone. We'll figure this out together." That promise felt like a lifeline, but also a chain. Because what we had was beautiful and tender, yet built on a foundation that could crumble the moment someone else found out. One afternoon, as I was painting the trim in the hallway, I caught a glimpse of myself in the dusty mirror. The woman staring back was tired, worn down by life's relentless challenges, but also somehow more alive, more real than she'd been in years. And it scared me. I wondered what my ex would think if he knew. Would he see me as a failure? As someone who gave up on us? Or would he understand that sometimes people break, and in breaking, find new pieces of themselves? The loneliness that had once suffocated me was now mixed with a fiery desire, not just for Mr. Reynolds, but for a life that felt worth living. But the outside world was unforgiving. One evening, while Mr. Reynolds was fixing the plumbing in my kitchen, a neighbor stopped by, Mrs. Keller, a sharp-eyed woman with a penchant for gossip. She smiled warmly at me, then glanced at Mr. Reynolds. "You two seem close," she said with a knowing look. My heart pounded. I managed a nervous laugh. "Just landlord and tenant." But I could feel the weight of her suspicion. That night, rumors started to swirl quietly through the building, whispers about the landlord's special attention. To me, the fear of being exposed tightened around me like a noose. I tried to pull back, to create distance between Mr. Reynolds and myself, but it wasn't easy. Every time I saw him, every shared smile or touch, I felt alive in ways I hadn't in years. Our passion burned brighter in secret, a mix of longing and tenderness fueled by the knowledge that what we had was forbidden. One night, after a particularly long day of repairs and whispered conversations, he took me in his arms by the fireplace. The flickering flames cast dancing shadows on the walls as we kissed, slow, deep, desperate. "I don't want to lose you," he whispered between kisses. "I don't want to lose you either," I confessed, my voice trembling. But beneath the passion lay an undercurrent of fear of what would happen if the truth came out. How would my friends, my family, even strangers judge me? Would Mark see me as just another mistake? Time moved forward, relentless. The rent became less of a worry, but the emotional toll grew heavier. I found myself lying awake at night, staring at the ceiling, torn between desire and doubt. Mr. Reynolds was no longer just my landlord or my secret lover. He was becoming the center of my fragile world. Yet, I knew I had to face the truth. One evening I sat down with him, hands shaking. "I can't keep living like this," I said softly. "We need to decide what this means." He looked at me, eyes steady but filled with the same uncertainty. "I want more," he admitted. "But I also don't want to be the cause of your downfall." We agreed to take a step back, to think carefully about what we truly wanted. The decision was terrifying. The risk of losing everything, my dignity, my family, my chance at happiness, was immense. Weeks passed in a strange limbo. We saw less of each other, but the tension never truly faded. When we did meet, it was with a bittersweet intensity, knowing that what we shared might be fleeting, but unable to resist the pull. Then, just when I thought I couldn't carry the weight of the secret any longer, life surprised me. One rainy morning, my phone buzzed with a message from my ex. Not bitter or angry, but quiet and tentative. "I heard some things," he wrote. "Can we talk?" My heart raced. Was this an opportunity for closure? A chance to heal old wounds? I agreed to meet him at a small cafe downtown. The moment I saw him, memories flooded back. The laughter, the tears, the love and pain. We talked for hours, honestly and openly. I told him about my struggles, the loneliness, the mistake I had made with Mr. Reynolds. He listened without judgment, his eyes soft with understanding. "I don't know what the future holds," he said, "but I want you to find happiness, whatever that looks like." That conversation didn't fix everything, but it gave me something precious: peace. I realized that life wasn't about perfect choices or easy answers. It was messy, complicated, filled with unexpected offers and difficult decisions. With that clarity, I turned to Mr. Reynolds. We talked long into the night, laying everything bare. We decided to build something honest, slowly. A relationship not just born of desperation or need, but of genuine care and respect. It wouldn't be easy. There would be challenges and sacrifices. But for the first time in a long time, I felt hope. The city outside my window was still cold and relentless, but inside, there was warmth. A new beginning. As the weeks slipped by, my life took on a rhythm that was both comforting and chaotic. Mr. Reynolds, David, as I had learned to call him, became more than just the landlord who fixed leaky faucets and carried spare keys. He was a presence that filled the silence in my small apartment, a steady heartbeat in the loneliness that had once consumed me. We found ourselves sharing quiet breakfasts on chipped plates, exchanging stories over cups of cheap coffee, and talking long into the night about dreams we'd abandoned and fears we still held close. David was patient with my hesitations and the walls I still kept up, walls built from years of disappointment and broken trust. Yet, despite the warmth growing between us, the shadow of guilt never fully lifted. I thought of my past, the fractured relationship with my ex, the promises I had made to myself about never losing my way again. And I wondered with a sinking feeling if I was making the same mistakes all over again. One rainy afternoon, I sat by the window, watching. Droplets raced down the glass as David worked silently fixing the old radiator. The rain blurred the world outside, but inside, everything felt achingly clear. My heart, my desires, my fears. Do you ever wonder what your life would have been like if things had gone differently? I asked him quietly. He looked up, wiping sweat from his brow. "All the time," he admitted. But then I remind myself that every choice, every mistake brought me here to this moment with you. His words sent a warmth through me, a fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, this unexpected connection was something real. But reality was never far behind. One evening, as David and I shared a simple dinner, my phone buzzed with a message that made my stomach drop. It was from my ex, a blunt, cold message that hinted he'd heard rumors. Rumors that now threatened to unravel everything. Fear clawed at my chest. What if David's kindness was a secret the world would judge? What if my past mistakes became my present punishment? The next day, I avoided David's calls and messages, needing space to think, to breathe. When he finally came to see me, His face was etched with concern. "Talk to me," he urged gently. "Whatever this is, we can face it." I broke down, confessing my fears, my guilt, my uncertainty. And he held me close, not with judgment, but with understanding. "I don't want to be the cause of your pain," he whispered, "but I also don't want to lose what we're building." We agreed on honesty, no more secrets, no more hiding. Slowly, we opened our lives to each other. David shared stories of his past failures, his lost loves, and his hopes for the future. I told him about my shattered dreams and the loneliness that had almost consumed me. Together, we began to heal, not perfectly, but sincerely, yet the outside world was unforgiving. The rumors spread like wildfire, and whispers followed me in the hallways of my building. Friends distanced themselves, some judging quietly, others confronting me directly. It hurt. It stung deeply, but David stood by me, his loyalty unwavering. One evening, after a long day of work and whispered confrontations, David surprised me with a small gesture. A bouquet of wildflowers picked from a nearby park. "We're not perfect," he said softly, "but we're ours. And that's worth fighting for." His words were balm to my weary soul. With renewed strength, I faced my past head on. I reached out to my ex, seeking closure, not bitterness. Our conversation was hard, filled with tears and regrets, but it freed me to move forward. Meanwhile, Mark, the ghost of my former life, faded slowly into the background, replaced by a future I was beginning to believe in. David and I found joy in small things: lazy Sunday mornings tangled in sheets, laughter echoing in the kitchen, quiet moments of shared understanding. Our passion, once born of desperation, grew into something tender and real. We weren't perfect, and the scars of the past never fully disappeared, but in each other's arms, we found a home. Life was messy, unpredictable, and sometimes painful, but it was ours. And for the first time in a long time, I was ready to embrace whatever came next. The days turned into months, and my world slowly shifted in ways I hadn't expected. Living with the quiet comfort of David's presence, I began to reclaim parts of myself I thought were lost forever. The nights filled with his steady voice, the gentle touch of his hand reassuring me that I wasn't alone anymore. David was different from anyone I'd known, patient without being passive, kind without losing his strength. He listened when I talked about my past mistakes without judgment, and he held me when the weight of regret threatened to pull me under. But more than that, he challenged me to believe in a future that was worth fighting for. We started to share more than just space. Our conversations stretched into early mornings, where the world was still hushed and full of promise. I found myself opening up about dreams I'd buried, about the loneliness that had haunted me even in crowds. David spoke about his own battles, the failed marriage he'd never fully healed from, the dreams he had sacrificed to take care of his family, and the quiet hope that maybe love could find him again. Our connection deepened, blending friendship, longing, and a fierce tenderness that neither of us wanted to name too loudly. There was a passion simmering beneath the surface, an electricity in the way our eyes met, the way our hands found each other in the dark, but the world outside my apartment was less forgiving. One afternoon, as I returned from work, I found a note slipped under my door. It was anonymous, cruel, accusing me of taking advantage of David, calling me a homewrecker, a liar. The words stung, but the real pain came from the way neighbors began to look at me differently, the whispers that followed in hallways and elevators. I wanted to retreat, to hide away from the judgment and the shame. But David stood beside me, unwavering. He faced the rumors head-on, confronting anyone who questioned the honesty of our relationship. His fierce loyalty became my shield. Yet, despite his strength, I sensed the toll it took on him. One night, after a particularly hard day, he sat beside me on the worn-out couch, exhaustion etched into his face. "I never thought I'd have to fight for something like this again," he admitted, voice low. "But I'm not giving up." I reached for his hand, squeezing it with all the courage I could muster. "Neither am I." The love between us was no longer a quiet secret. It was a battle cry, a declaration that we would not be broken by the past or the judgment of others. Slowly, the walls I'd built around my heart began to crumble. I started to believe that maybe I deserved happiness, that love didn't have to come with pain attached, but life had its own plans. One evening, David received a call that changed everything. His ex-wife was seriously ill, and he needed to travel out of town to help care for their children. The news left a hollow ache in my chest, the uncertainty of how long he'd be gone, the fear of facing the loneliness once more. As he packed a small bag, we held each other tightly, promising to stay connected no matter the distance. Those weeks apart were some of the hardest I'd faced. The silence of my apartment felt deafening, and the nights stretched endlessly. I poured myself into work, trying to drown out the ache, but every quiet moment was filled with thoughts of him. Our calls were lifelines, moments of laughter, whispered confessions, and shared dreams. But even through the phone, I felt the distance growing. I realized then how much David had become a part of me, how deeply I'd fallen. When he finally returned, the reunion was quiet but profound. We didn't need words. Our embrace said everything. The months apart had tested us, but it had also shown me the strength of what we had in time. I introduced David to close friends, watching nervously as he navigated the new role in my life. Some were accepting, others wary, but through it all, David remained steady, a constant reminder that love could heal, even when it was messy and complicated. One lazy Sunday afternoon, as the sunlight streamed through the curtains, David surprised me with a small ring, simple, elegant, and a question that made my heart race. Will you take this journey with me? Not because it's perfect, but because we choose it every day. Tears spilled down my cheeks as I nodded, overwhelmed by the love that had grown from brokenness. We weren't perfect, far from it, but in each other we found a home, a place where forgiveness, hope, and passion intertwined. Our story was one of unexpected beginnings, of mistakes and redemption, of love that refused to let go. And as I looked toward the future, hand in hand with David, I knew I was ready to face whatever came next. The days after David's return were charged with a renewed intensity. The space between us no longer felt like a void to fill, but a living, breathing connection pulsing with desire and hope. The distance had sharpened our feelings. Every touch, every glance was amplified by months of yearning. One evening, after a quiet dinner, we found ourselves drawn together like magnets, unable to resist the pull any longer. The room was bathed in the soft glow of candlelight, shadows flickering against the walls as rain tapped a gentle rhythm on the window panes. David looked at me with a tenderness so raw it took my breath away, eyes dark with longing, lips slightly parted as if waiting for permission to cross the final line. I didn't hesitate. The moment was ours, fragile, fierce, and full of promise. His hands were everywhere, tracing the curves of my face, slipping down my back, pulling me close until there was no space left between us. Our breaths mingled, hot and urgent, as his lips claimed mine in a kiss that was both a promise and a confession. It was slow, deliberate, every movement soaked with the kind of passion that made the world outside fade into insignificance. The heat between us grew, a fire fueled not just by desire, but by the deep ache of two souls finding refuge in each other after so much loss. Clothes fell away, forgotten on the floor, as our bodies spoke a language only we understood. The trembling of fingertips on skin, the soft gasps in the dark, the heartbeat pounding like thunder in our ears. David's touch was reverent and demanding all at once, exploring every inch of me as if memorizing a sacred map. I responded with equal hunger, my fingers tangled in his hair, my voice breaking with need as we lost ourselves in a storm of sensation. Time slowed, stretching out in waves of ecstasy and intimacy that left me trembling, utterly alive. Afterwards, we lay tangled in each other's arms, the quiet hum of the rain the only sound as our breathing steadied. I felt safe, cherished, and more desired than I had in years. The vulnerability between us wasn't weakness. It was the foundation of something fierce and true. But love, as we both knew, wasn't just about passion and tenderness. It was about facing the shadows lurking at the edges of our lives. In the following weeks, we navigated the challenges with a new sense of unity. The whispers in the building hadn't stopped, and the looks of disapproval were harder to ignore. Yet, every time the world pushed against us, David's steady presence reminded me why I fought to believe in this second chance. One afternoon, as we sat side by side on the worn couch, he surprised me by pulling out a small notebook filled with poems and reflections he'd written during his time away. His words were raw and honest, speaking of regret, hope, and the healing power of love. Reading them, I felt an even deeper connection, a bridge between two fractured hearts slowly mending. Our days were filled with small acts of kindness, making coffee in the morning, sharing quiet laughter over silly jokes, holding hands during walks in the park. But it was the nights that were sacred, where the outside world fell away, leaving only us wrapped in the glow of our own making. One night, under a sky heavy with stars, we lay on the rooftop of the building, the city lights twinkling below like scattered gems. David pulled me close, his breath warm against my ear as he whispered promises of a future built together. "I never thought I'd find this again," he said, voice trembling with emotion. "You've given me hope I thought was lost." I pressed my forehead to his, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath my palm. "We're not perfect," I whispered, "but we're ours." The kiss that followed was fierce and tender, celebration of survival and surrender. Our bodies moved together in harmony, every touch a declaration that we belonged to each other, not just in fleeting moments, but in the quiet, messy reality of everyday life. As dawn crept over the horizon, painting the sky with hues of pink and gold, I knew this was more than just passion. It was love in its most honest form, complicated, beautiful, and fiercely alive. Though the road ahead was uncertain, with challenges waiting around every corner, we faced it hand in hand, ready to build something real from the fragments of our past. Together, we were unstoppable. As the weeks passed, the passion between David and me softened into a steady flame, warm, comforting, and real. It was no longer just about stolen moments and secret touches. It became a connection rooted in understanding, forgiveness, and hope. David was no longer just the landlord or the man who had made an unexpected offer. He became my partner, my confidant, the person I could lean on when the world felt too heavy. His presence filled the lonely spaces I'd tried to ignore for so long, and in return, I offered him a love that was patient and true. One evening, as we sat together on the threadbare couch in my small apartment, the city humming quietly outside, David took my hands in his. The look in his eyes was gentle but full of conviction. "I don't want to just be someone who helped you when you were broke and alone," he said softly. "I want to be the person who stands by you through everything, the good, the hard, the unexpected." Tears welled in my eyes, not from sadness, but from a deep sense of relief and belonging. "I want that too," I whispered, my voice catching. We leaned into each other, the space between us melting away as we kissed, not just with desire, but with a promise. A promise to build a future together, no matter how uncertain it might be. Days turned into months, and life began to change in subtle but beautiful ways. David supported me as I pursued new opportunities, cheering me on during the small victories and comforting me during setbacks. I, in turn, became his anchor, the calm in his storm. We celebrated anniversaries quietly, with homemade dinners and long talks that stretched into the early hours. Our laughter filled the apartment, replacing the silence that had once been so deafening. Love grew in the everyday moments, in the way he brushed his stray hair from my face, in the soft goodnight whispers, in the steady hand that held mine when fears crept in. It was imperfect and messy, but it was ours, and that made it beautiful. One crisp autumn evening, under a canopy of golden leaves, David surprised me with a simple ring, a symbol not just of commitment, but of the journey we'd taken from loneliness to love. "I want to keep choosing you," he said, his voice trembling with hope. I smiled through tears, feeling the fullness of a heart finally healed. And I choose you. Together, we stepped into a new chapter, knowing that life's challenges would come, but trusting in the strength of the love we'd found, unexpected, unplanned, but deeply and irrevocably true. In the end, it wasn't the offer or the circumstances that defined us. It was the courage to open our hearts, to forgive, to embrace the imperfect beauty of second chances, and in that love, I found not just a partner, but a home.